Well, everybody, we're back again. I'm here with Holley Maher. She's an illustrator graphic designer and also a neurodivergent creative. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about that. If you want to introduce yourself first, Holly, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm really
Sure.
excited to talk about this. It's something I don't get to talk about a lot, and I think that more people need to know about. So I'm really stoked for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have ADHD, which means I've been a lot of things over the course of my life and career. I have been a professional songwriter for film and television. I have, of course, been a graphic designer, an illustrator of children's books. I now lay out and make magazines with my partner, Joe. Um, oh, I read tarot every now and then and get paid for it,
Love it.
which is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a crazy fun journey. I've been all over the place.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I find that to be, as I was mentioning before we got on here, I work with quite a few ADD, ADHD, neurodivergent kind of inclined creatives. And that seems to be a thing. Like they generally have like multiple areas of interests and they're usually very good at all of them. So one of the things that piqued my interest about this, and just to be able to help better help people like that, because it's not something that I deal with, or at least I don't think I deal with. Maybe I'll find out by the end of this that I do, and that'll be
Yeah,
another rabbit hole for me.
sorry if
Yeah.
that's the case. Sorry to anyone else who's going to listen to this and have crisis. I know what you're going through.
Yeah. Well, to start us off, can you just tell me what it is like to be a neurodivergent creative in general? I mean, either like a day in the life or just like what it feels like internally.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let me just tell you that like ADHD brains, like instead of like having a very clear point A to point B conversationally, have like 400 highways that lead, stop everywhere along the line on the way to point B. So I'm really sorry about that
Mm,
in advance.
it's okay.
We'll do our best to keep the train of thought on track.
Yeah.
Uh, it feels crazy. It feels really nuts. I guess the internal experience of it is really up and down. People who struggle with ADHD also struggle usually with anxiety and depression, or are misdiagnosed consistently with anxiety or depression. Um, and so that kind of leaves us, that coupled with the sort of internalized ableism and shame of not being able to meet whatever standards we in society perceive we should be meeting by certain points, that leads to a lot of self-deprecating feelings and shame. So there's a ton of seasons in my life. I remember telling an early therapist that it felt like, I was really, really up for like a couple of months and doing super creative stuff and feeling really good about myself and achieving all this stuff and like getting up at regular times and having regular sleep. And then I would just fall into months and months of like full on goblin mode. I've had to call my parents on several occasions in my life and been like, Mom, can you fly out here and help me? Because my house has gone to hell in a handbasket. I haven't fed myself in many days.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's hard. But the positive side of all the crazy collection of like symptoms that we struggle with and behavioral patterns, when you can reframe them into superpowers, which honestly kind of are, um, you you become so much happier and you're able to actually employ those things to your advantage. Um, the idea of ADHD as a disorder is largely named, even spoken about, from the perspective of how it affects a neurotypical person, someone who's
Mm-hmm.
not neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
So, something that's been labeled a disorder or attention deficit is interesting because we don't experience that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a deficit of attention. I just have a really, really hard time giving it to you when you're trying to teach me long division. So,
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, I
you
have
can be
plenty.
you can be attentive. It's just where is it gonna go? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, and I'm
yeah,
also not afraid to just like not give a crap about
yeah,
whatever it is trying to teach me. If I would rather read Pride or Prejudice behind my math notebook, you know.
yeah.
So it's tough. It's especially if you grew up without a diagnosis, without the support of people knowing you and like being able to accommodate what you might need. That's super hard. Your race and socioeconomic background will definitely affect how hard it is to live with these certain uh, disorders and behavioral patterns.
Sure.
Um, but it's also led me down incredible paths. I've pretty much dipped my toe at least into every single thing that I've ever wanted to do in my life since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Um, and that's nuts. Like that's really nuts. Like I'm 36 and I've literally done every. When you were a kid, if when I was a kid, if you asked me what I wanted to do, I would say I want to dance, I want to do music, and then I want to do like books or magazines. And I've literally done and dedicated like decades even to all of those things, which is insane.
That is insane. That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
amazing. And for many of the ADD, ADHD creatives that I've met, they have huge potentials in a lot of areas, which is, I don't know, it's just insane. It's just amazing. So what I'm really interested in for you, especially because when we first started talking, which we haven't done much of. But when you came across my TikTok, actually, that's how I've met so many of the guests on this podcast is through
Yep.
TikTok. So for anybody knocking TikTok out there, it is, to me, it's one of the best community building tools.
Please.
Period. Yeah,
If you're
but
knocking it, you don't know enough.
for
Yeah.
real, for
That's
real,
that's all.
for real. So, but what I came across with you specifically, and just a little bit of conversation we have, is that you have really started to hone in on your own process, your own, how you get through your day, how you get through certain tasks, how you get through, to the point that you're at with some of these things that you're talking about, right? So I'm interested to know what your routine's like,
Mm.
how you prepare for your day, for any particular task. How does that work for
Yeah.
you?
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying that if you ask me this question in like 6 months, it will be completely different.
Okay.
Uh, and people with ADHD tend to try all kinds of things to get themselves under control and out of goblin mode.
Yeah.
Uh, and we have a hard time sticking to that. But I definitely do not see that as a problem. I see that as anything that works for me for a time is absolutely a success. Um, but what I'm doing currently, I've been able to stick with for a while. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I, let's see. Uh, for reasons of necessity and by personal preference, I've switched to a very low demand sort of lifestyle. Um, I know this is not possible for everyone, and it's a decision that I've made really to prioritize my peace and not becoming burnt out again uh, over achieving wealth or notoriety or anything else. Like, there's a lot more I could achieve if I decided to push myself in that direction and still strive for those things that are going to be much harder for people who are neurodivergent. Um, for me, it was easier to embrace that because I find that when I do, I'm healthier and more more ready to face those things. And that by creating a lower demand lifestyle where I'm working fewer hours, resting a lot more, recuperating a lot more, the time that I do dedicate to like being at my desk making something is so much more effective. Because I will sit at this desk and do nothing for 8 hours, and that's just not worth it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, all that to say, I wake up mostly when I feel like it.
Yeah.
Uh, kind of like, well, right now I guess I'm waking up in the 8:30 to 9 o'clock area, but I don't really care what it is. And then I sit down for like an hour with a notebook. Uh, I've tried a million and one notebooks, but this one is working pretty well. It's like a mindfulness journal. It's called the Ritual Journal by Saint Soleil.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, It kind of asks you to set an intention for the day, sort of theme your day. There's a little bit of like a scripting, kind of manifesting piece to it. And after I've done all that lovely, touchy-feely woo-woo stuff, I then sit down and make a realistic and achievable to-do list for myself. Um, that has taken so long to figure out how to do. Um, but I feel it's better to give myself a realistic idea of goals to the best of my ability, so that I'm not disappointing myself. Like I don't need to add shame to anything.
Yes.
There's plenty that other people will put on you, but it doesn't need to come from me.
Yeah.
So we also struggle with time blindness, so it's really, really hard for us to estimate how long things will take. So
Mm-hmm.
I just do my best. I've also changed that language to gentle goals instead of tasks or to dos. And I've taken all the pressure like out of getting any of those things done. And I just do the best that I can. That's kind of it. I take frequent breaks. I drink water.
Yeah.
I do what I can with the energy that I have. I change my expectations of myself when I know that I'm lower energy or have fewer spoons, as we sometimes say in the community. Um, and when I have more, I give more. And that's pretty much it.
I mean,
It's
that
really,
sounds. Some of this is what I would tell anyone.
yeah,
I was,
yes.
it really is a lot of what I would tell anyone. I mean, the biggest thing that I've found, even for myself, to become successful, because there is a lot of self shame that happens when you set this goal list, even for just one day, and you get to the
Mm,
end of the day and go, I didn't do this, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do this.
yes.
And if
Yeah.
you can get to a point that you are realistic about what you can achieve in a day, it just has this kind of snowball effect for the rest of the week or the rest of the month or whatever, if you can maintain that, right? Because my
Yes.
my eyes are bigger than my stomach all the time. Where I
100%.
go always, I'm like, I'm going to do this
Yeah.
and this and this, and inevitably, it's a railroad from the beginning. So,
Sure. Yeah.
um, so no, I can really appreciate that. I'm interested to know. So, do you over time with myself, and because timing is a really hard thing, how
Mm.
have you gotten to that place? Do you just automatically kind of
Oh,
overestimate what you're going to need for each task, or do you pay attention and go back at, do you have a lot of repetitive things that you do, that so like looking back, I can kind of estimate going forward? How do you try and determine your kind of time and how much you can do in a day?
yeah. There have been a lot of different methods I use, and just like being alive, I've been analyzing this behavior in myself forever. It's kind of like a constant state of being for people who are neurodivergent to just be like looking inwards and trying to tweak and fix
Yeah.
all the time. Um, but yeah, I know how long my journaling process takes because I've done it for many months now. It takes about an hour, maybe some change if I feel like it. Um, if I need to, I'll like time myself, or keep a calendar. Also, for when I'm working on a design project, um, I find it really helpful to remind myself in my notebook like what I'm working on at the moment, so that the next time I have a big project like that, I can go back and say, okay, well, on this one, it took me a week to get mood boards done because of X, Y, and Z. Like I had a bad mental health day, or the client didn't get back to me in time, or it was just harder than I thought it was going to be. Um, I'm able to go, okay, well, mood boards don't take me a day or two, they take me several. So now I
Yeah.
know not to uh, set myself a sort of idealistic schedule versus a more realistic one. So yeah,
Yeah.
I also buffer, for things to go wrong. I have to sort of just know that like if I'm going to protect my energy so that I can keep working on this over months, that's going to mean taking more time off than other people will. And
Yeah.
there might be a random Wednesday where my executive dysfunction is so bad that nothing's going to happen. And it's better for me and for the overall project if I can take that time to recuperate instead of pushing through because I'm just sort of like stealing from the energy bank, uh, from Peter to pay Paul kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just
If
gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I make that choice, sure, like, sure, I guess I can choose to push through it, although sometimes you really just can't. Um, if you do, you're taking a little bit away for the next time that you might need it. So just really try not to get myself into energy debt, really.
I I love that. Yeah, honestly, again, these are like little nuggets for everybody. I mean, we constantly. I mean, we're always in overwork mode. I mean,
Hmm.
anybody that owns their own business, anybody that's a freelancer, anybody in corporate, I don't care. It's a constant. That's just what's kind of expected at this point. So being able to protect your energy first. I said that before. Energy and time are currency. They're the most valuable currency.
Yeah,
So knowing that ahead of time and working from that space is super valuable.
yeah.
So you coming up with this kind of process for yourself. Um, how would you say that other neurodivergent creatives or just people in general can dial in on what's going to work for them?
Well, I think that everyone's lives are super different, and everyone's ADHD or ADHD or any other of the very similar sort of mental things that live in the same neurodivergent category, we all experience that so differently. If you have autism and ADHD, it will be flavored differently than it is with just ADHD. Um, so all that to say, my routine just definitely will not work word for word for someone else. It works for me because I've spent years honing in on it. But I think if I could go back and like tell myself uh, all of this, I would just say to not feel so bad about having to try a lot of things, to like let
Mm,
go of the shame of having bought that one journal that just didn't work
mm-hmm,
and you have to leave it and move on. Um,
mm-hmm.
First of all, you just have to let go of that in general. Like having ADHD is a practice in radical self acceptance to a ridiculous degree. It's only something I've learned in the past few years to just fully. It's one thing to like forgive myself for being the way that I am. It's another thing to even like understand that the way that I am is not something I can control very much. Uh, and it's a whole nother thing to like accept that I'm the way that I am because I have a disability, and to also recognize that like if nothing changes and if nothing else succeeds, that is still okay. And I'm still a valid and valuable person because I would never ever look at someone whose disability has really hindered their life and say that they're not valid or not worth the same as someone who has been able to meet society's standards for success. So I have to
Yeah,
extend myself the same courtesy.
yeah,
Otherwise, I'll be holding myself back forever and it's just not worth it. So
yeah,
you have to just accept yourself the way you are. That doesn't mean you are giving up or that you have to like throw in the towel. It just means that you have to realize that like these things, trying things new, modifying things is part of the process. And it's probably always going to be part of the process. So just lean in. uh,
yeah. I mean, rather than saying this is how I am and just giving up to that fact and kind of going against the grain or going against the trying to swim upstream, right? Rather
yeah, yeah,
realizing, having that realization and going, okay, well, I'm just going to continue to whittle away at this
yeah,
as much as I can and be fluid when I need to be fluid and be rigid when I need to be rigid
yeah,
and just keep going with it. Yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
I also think it's really important to tailor these things to you specifically because you're not going to do these things if you're not deeply interested in them,
Hmm.
like to a clinical level. So I have to use methods that cater to my behavioral patterns. Like I really like Notion for long-term
Yes,
project planning. Yeah, I use a
I've heard this.
it's good. Yeah. I
Yeah,
use
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
I use a great started off with Abby Connick's project tracking template. and heavily modified that and changed it to work for me. The formulas and math on the back end of Notion are a lot for me, so I simplified that down, and I do find myself using Notion pretty regularly for big things that I know I will just poof leave my brain if they're not somewhere serious. Uh,
Yeah.
but I also know that my whole life, like my morning routine, my everything, can't live there. Because if I can't see it, it does not exist. Flat out, period. Just like all the dead cucumbers in my fridge. It's just what it is. It's
Yeah.
really, it's hard. I mean, I have to apologize to friends, to apologize to friends constantly for just being like, I'm so sorry that I forgot that you exist for like several months, but like, can we go do something? It's just, it just happens. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the notebook now works much better for me because the notebooks, really, there's two of them, live on my dining room table and they don't move. And so when I wake up and I sit down to have coffee, it's there and I might as well do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay. So you've got two. You just say you have two notebooks. So one
yeah.
is the journal. What's the other?
Yeah. Okay. So what I do is that there's the intentions and scripting part of this. I I do all the touchy-feely stuff like setting focus topics for my day, and that's like very loose and abstract usually for me. Um, in fact, it's gotten looser and more abstract as I've started letting go of being married to a specific outcome. I find that, the things, the intentions I'm setting now are I'm going to have a good day and be proud of myself, and that's it. That is the
Yeah.
only expectation. And that's awesome. I love it. So I do my gratitude stuff in here. I set my intention and do my scripting. Then I like to take that scripting paragraph and write it 3 times. So I have a bigger notebook where I write those scripting things a few more times while I'm sitting and listening to like a playlist or something. Um, it gives me a really nice chance to just be in my body. Um, for me, I love stationery and writing, so it's really automatic. And once I've got that paragraph sort of like in my head anyway, I just can like zone out. And because I'm just focused enough, it allows me the perfect amount of space to like look at my body and say, okay, am I breathing enough? I will literally forget to breathe if I don't think about it. It's nuts. Uh, am I anxious? Is my like heart palpitating? Did I drink too much coffee? Did I remember my meds? And ADHD and neurodivergent folks will tend to deal with poor interoception, which is just the ability to understand the signals that your body is sending you. So it might take us hours to realize we're hungry until we're just like falling on the floor. So
Yes.
yeah, so
I have. Yeah.
it's yeah,
I've run
well,
into that with a couple of people, some very close people to me when we've been working on things or whatever, and they're like, I'm just in this mood, I'm this, that, and the other, and I'm like, when was the last time you had water, or when did you eat? And
yeah,
they're going,
oh
and
yeah,
literally the look on their face is like, huh? I'm like, your body has to have this.
yeah.
And they're like, yes, and they go
Mhm.
get something to eat, and they're like, oh God, I'm fine,
Yep.
totally fine.
You might be in an absolutely insane mood and unable to focus on anything because your blood sugar is absolutely through the floor.
Yeah,
So
tanked.
yeah, yeah,
Well, so now that we're talking about this, because it sounds like a lot of what you're doing, you have formulated in a way that always pleasing to you. It seems to be, at least what I'm hearing right now. Like it either jives with what you're doing, or it's something that you will automatically gravitate towards. Like you enjoy stationery, you enjoy writing, and
mm,
doing all that.
yeah,
So that seems to be. So is that? Would you say that that's something that is kind of throughout that you've kind
yeah.
of used to? Yeah.
That was wholly intentional. It's on the table because it will be easier for me to remember. It's paper because I prefer paper. Um, it's also paper and like outside of my office because it feels just enough like work to like remind me that I don't hate work when I actually do it. You know how like you avoid working out
Yeah.
because you think you can't stand it, and then you actually work out and you're like, oh, okay, well, I actually like this.
Oh, that was like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So sitting and writing just gets me in the vibe, but like really gently. I still have super low expectations for myself. There's no timer when I need to sit by the desk or whatever. Um, so it turns.
And
Hmm?
I was just going to say, does it give, because I've heard in just my kind of cursory searching of like how to kind of help neurodivergent creatives kind of through things, about instead of, one of the big things that I always tell people is like, it's the eat the frog thing, where it's like do
Yeah,
what you don't want to do first,
yeah,
right? And then I talk to people that are neurodivergent and they're like, I no, it doesn't work.
can't do
And what
that.
I've seen is, right, it's the thing that you want to do the most is what I've
Hmm.
heard is one of the things. So I'm wondering, is that really just a marker for like moving through your day, then is kind of keeping that like that in tow of like, okay, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it, and then I feel like I've achieved something, so now I can do the next thing that I want to do.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. It's definitely designed that way. We
Yeah.
definitely have to lure ourselves into doing things.
Yeah.
A lot of people with ADHD or autism specifically will have what's called a pathological demand avoidance profile, uh, which
Okay.
which means that anything that feels like a demand, our initial gut response is basically go jump off a cliff.
No.
Like, don't
Whatever.
talk to
I want
me.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Listen,
no.
I'll take it. I'll
It's
take it.
it's crazy. It is crazy. I mean, there have been times where I've wanted to do something and someone has in any way insinuated that we maybe should get on with it or whatever. And I'm like, can you like never speak to me again, please? Because now I don't want to do that thing at all.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's nuts. So starting with tasks that we like and are less threatening help ease us into those things that we might be avoiding at the moment.
Yeah. I can understand that. I mean, I think I almost want to structure my day that way, right? Like it's
Yeah,
we fork, what, honestly, the more that I'm talking to you, the more that I'm thinking about this, it just sounds like the rest of us are just all forcing ourselves to do things we don't want to do.
and you're so onto something. Okay, here's the thing. I say that ADHD is like a full on allergy to capitalism. So while you guys are pushing yourselves to get out there and go do it, whether you want to or it feels good or not, um, we can't sometimes. Or if we do, we end up in a 3-year burnout, like I'm currently pulling myself out of.
Yeah.
So we just can't, and also most of the time don't want to. So if if you're going to tell me I have to work a job I don't care about in order to afford the house I'm in, I would much rather sell my house and start a garden than ever have to do that. Please and thank you. Like
Yeah. I
it's
mean, I'm hearing like some sort of code cracking over here, or or you're
yeah,
like, but it's my life, so why should I be doing something just to, I'll just reorder whatever I'm doing or whatever I need to
yeah,
maintain my own mental sanity and health.
yeah. It's just I've had to work really hard to change my priorities. It was really difficult to unlearn. Having
Yeah.
a partner who constantly reminds me that I'm just fine the way that I am and life is amazing the way that it is, and that we are really by a lot of standards, really successful. I've achieved a ton of stuff in my career. That's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
but it's hard to remember that. Uh, and teaching myself that all of those things are true has been super hard. And teaching myself that I don't need what I thought I needed has been really hard. But like probably the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. So
Yeah, I think we could all take a page out of that book right there, for real. I mean, I'm sitting here going, what can I get rid of to maintain some sanity
no
today, for
kidding. I
real?
mean,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. ADHD, well, neurodivergent symptoms are just symptoms of being human. It's just that we experience those things like to a clinical and absolutely debilitating level. We're experiencing decision fatigue, demand avoidance, et cetera, to a point where we either can't control it or it's really hindering our ability. Uh,
Yeah.
and we need support and accommodations to get through those things, whether it comes from us or from the people around us in our workplace. But the thing is, those symptoms are all just symptoms of being alive. uh,
Yeah.
it makes it hard to even, again, like think of it as a disorder. It's just that our brains are working in a different way where we're bumping up against this more often. Um,
Yeah.
so I just think it would be really lovely if we could just give everybody these accommodations because everyone would benefit from them. It's
Yeah. I
just got to keep yourself sane, you know?
Yeah, and you actually made the perfect segue into my
Mm,
question. I was based on giving others accommodation. I mean, we accommodate people in all sorts of things. So, but
mm,
knowing that about people, what would you say to a non-neurodivergent? What was the so
mm.
what's the alternate term? Not neuro, but what's the divergent? What's the other one that you said?
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical. Okay, so what would you
Hmm.
say to a neurotypical person working with a neurodivergent person? So how
Yeah.
can we better assist
Um,
neurodivergent folks here?
yeah, you would be absolutely flabbergasted if you saw the amount of notes I took to answer these questions for you.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, so there's a bit. I'm gonna try really hard to be
Sure.
clear. So, um, first of all, we've got to drop the internalized ableism. We have to accept that certain people need certain things that are different from us. Step one. We also have to stop linking like laziness and disorganization and lateness, um, or just being like weird as a moral failing of some kind. Like
Yeah.
that it's called respectability politics, the belief that they're linked somehow. Um, that is super. Those two things are really, really hard to deconstruct, but it's one of those things where if you solve those two problems, everything else kind of wears itself out. But specifically, daily actions as you're working on dismantling those notions, um, it's just to make it safe for people to be who they are. Um, not not being bugged out when like I need to ask you to like repeat something 400 times because we have auditory processing problems as well sometimes. So if you said something to me like fully out of context, you just like spat out a sentence that had nothing to do with what we're talking about, like
Mm.
started talking about like the Billie Eilish concert or something, I would be like the the hilly what now? Like what? Like without context, I sometimes just it's like jibber jabber. Can't hear it at
Mm-hmm.
all. So I constantly have to ask people to repeat themselves, or what works better is to ask someone to say what they've said in a different way. Like, can you just like,
Ah.
say that some other way because it's not sinking in? So like allowing for that just in daily conversation, um, being as clear and like honest as possible. Um, it can be difficult for us to like read between the lines or like understand corporate speak or dismantle tone in emails. We're constantly worried someone's mad at us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So just being like real about what your expectations are of that person is really helpful, and it's something that I think neurotypical people view as rude, maybe to, I don't know, like be super explanatory and say
Mm-hmm.
something like, when I say that this is a brainstorming meeting, I really want your feedback. You know, you don't have to be afraid of stepping on someone's toes. Or, it's okay, like Jake or whatever. This is a brainstorming meeting, but so and so is here and he really doesn't like it when it dis, just sort of devolves into you explaining to us how something could be working better. And sometimes that's really valued and it's definitely one of our superpowers. Like pattern recognition, finding the fault in the ways that things just could be so much more efficient and easier on everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not welcome everywhere. And we have a really hard time figuring out where that's
Yeah.
appropriate. Um, so just in general, being really honest about what the expectations are. Don't be afraid to over explain. We love it. We write novels of emails for that very same reason. Uh, and yeah, just being okay with like deadlines, extensions, like timing, taking the pressure off in any way that you can is like really cool. If you can like plan for the fact that we might be a little late, like tell us that it's due on Friday when it's really due on Monday, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that for sure. And I think I've even done that where I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
like I'll
let's
take
work.
that.
Yeah, let's work together on padding. Like, let's work
Yeah,
together on okay, how much time do you think you need for this? And then
yeah,
I'm going to overextend it. Like,
yeah.
and it's simple. It's
It
so
is, yeah.
simple to do things like that. It really is.
Yeah, you can pretty much count on the fact that we're underestimating
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. So I thank you. Yeah, these are all, I mean, fantastic, and a lot of, I can attest to having worked with, like I said, several, and one very close to me that she, many of these things came up in our conversations, and I'm at that point I was very like not understanding, like my brain wasn't computing
Yeah,
because I'm
no.
like, it's just like this, you just do this. But
Yeah,
then, in working with her kind of over time, I realized that this is just kind of an inherent part of how she has to live her life, and kind of making, not even making allowances, just understanding and helping through, somebody through that. All of this is super simple. So thank you for even
yeah,
validating, and hopefully I'm even co-validating for people listening.
absolutely. Yeah. It's it's
Well,
it's super helpful for anyone to be able to sort of like recognize uh that we're going through something because we have a hard time doing that for ourselves sometimes. So if anyone is able to like look out for those things, that can only be helpful.
yeah, and I would say that, in my experience, I would say that neurodivergent creatives or people in general are some of the best assets on a team.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anything, because they're, I don't, at least the ones that I've been, used to, they're very talented. They're, very aware of, they can hyperfixate on things and go
Hmm.
down the rabbit hole and
Yeah.
learn like crazy and do, it's more
Hmm.
in just like, okay, this is the rabbit hole you need to be in. That,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing,
I
So,
mean,
but it's,
when you put us in roles that play off our natural strengths and interests, it's like angels singing and shit. So
yeah,
it's
it
really
really
great.
angels singing and shit.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
will say that. I will. Yes, I will second that. So, okay. So, one last question for you before we find out where we can go find you.
Mm.
Some for any creative that is dealing with ADHD, ADD, any sort of neurodivergent situation or challenge. Do you have any specific tools, resources, books, podcast tools, anything that they can kind of lean into or test out?
Yeah, there's a ton. So definitely when you look for it, you will find it because it's there. I have to just recommend TikTok on the whole.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of our parents or even mental health professionals think that TikTok isn't the best thing. They think that we're like convincing ourselves we have something we don't. When in reality, these um, these uh, these neurotypes have been recognized only so recently, and there's only so much real clinical research about this, specifically for women, because all that testing was done on young, rich white boys. So all the
Mm,
information we have for how ADHD presents is pretty much geared around boys. That's only just now
yeah.
starting to change. Autism is only an 80-year-old diagnosis. The first person who was ever diagnosed with autism just died like a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so
Okay.
that's how new it is. That's how understood it is.
Yeah.
So all that to say, if you can go on TikTok and find lived experience being talked about openly, honestly, and constantly, which you will find
Yeah.
if you look for it there, um,
Mm.
just take what you can get, learn where you can, do what helps. Um, oh, specifically, there's oh no, I didn't look up her handle. I'll have to look it up. Her name is Caroline. She's really sweet. She's on TikTok. She does like she'll like just so you can like find her. She'll like do
Yeah.
little outfits that are like sort of like Lord of the Ringsy or like Dooney, but like she'll try to make them like things you can wear in the real world. And she also talks about ADHD and parenting and being a creative. He came up with the idea of something called the dopamine menu, which has been really helpful for me. It basically takes into consideration the fact that there will be low dopamine days or low energy days, like average days and high ones. So if we spend too much time in that low dopamine or high dopamine state, we kind of forget like what we like to do in those states and what
Mhm.
helps.
Yes.
And we have a terrible habit of making high dopamine goals for ourselves when it was a success to get ourselves out of bed today, you know? So these menus give you reframing of common tasks based on your energy. So a low dopamine menu day might be just brushing your teeth, putting on deodorant, changing your clothes. Do you know what I mean? Like basic
Yeah.
self-care tasks. You're allowed to order in whatever you need to do, you know? But on a
Yeah.
medium day, we're going to be like, okay, well, today we can wash our face and today we can wash our hair. You know, today
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
tackle X, Y, and Z at work. So the menu system is very, very cool and super helpful for just learning what you can tolerate under those
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Um, Casey Davis has been on TikTok again, like really great for parenting with ADHD. She has a concept called closing duties, where I'm just info dumping on you now, Erik. I'm sorry.
I
Um,
love it.
I could go on for days about this. But
Honestly, I'm like, how can I create a like neurotypical menu? Like, is there
do it, like
seriously? I'm
seriously.
like, how can I? Because that
Look,
sounds great to me.
the thing is, there really aren't very many um, accommodations or benefits, like government benefits for people with ADHD. Although it is, you know, a government sanctioned disability, it's really, really hard to get those to be on disability with ADHD. And um, anyway, not to mention that disability like is not a totally unlivable situation. So all that to say, you're not stealing anything from anyone
Sure. Yeah.
by
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
accommodating yourself. We're not stealing spotlight, attention, resources, research, any of it. So
Yeah.
feel free.
No, I
Um,
love it.
yeah. So Casey Davis's closing duties has been like so amazing for me, like keeping a tidy house. She
Okay.
will turn on some music, sometimes even like medieval, like throwback music or medieval like hip hop. They do like lo-fi medieval. It's really, really good,
Okay.
really fun.
Yeah.
And she'll just like pretend that she's like a medieval wench, like, closing up the bar, doing the counters, like having a great time. If that's what it takes to get you to want to do this, like go
Yeah.
ahead, man. Like put on your white Victorian lady nightgown and like
Yeah.
go for it.
Yes.
I mean, why not? There's
Why not?
there is no like whoever told us that we have to stop being like kids
Yeah.
has like lied to all of us and they should just like shut up forever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I agree.
so that's the closing duties is great. It's so
Yeah.
nice to wake up to a cleaner house. ADHD coach Ryan on TikTok is great for like workplace accommodations and stuff like that. Let's see. Viva La Chris. Chrissy is a content creator who grew up um, diagnosed and like accommodated for autism and ADHD. So she's really, really good at showing people what a supported and like untraumatized person with neurodivergence looks like, uh,
Oh
which
wow.
is,
Okay.
yeah, very cool because
Yeah.
it's so rare, really, to see someone who grew up without all of the shame. Uh, so
Yeah.
that's really cool. Let's see what else. Oh, there's two books I want to mention.
Sure.
Dirty Laundry by Richard Pink and Roxanne Emery, who are also on TikTok. I think their handle is ADHD Love. Um, they have their book Dirty Laundry is very approachable, like super easy, not very research heavy. There's research, obviously, but it's more about their lived experience as a woman with ADHD and her husband trying to accommodate and support her. So, really awesome for if you're trying to be there for someone else and you need to hear it from the neurodivergent person's perspective and the neurotypical person's perspective. Very interesting for that. And finally, Unmasking Autism by Devin Price is a much more like clinically minded book. It's about autism and also ADHD. The information is completely usable for anyone who's struggling with these things, and sort of like the next step if you want to graduate into the hyper fixated knowledge of
Yeah.
ADHD on the
Which I'm going to
whole.
bet there will be people that do.
Oh yeah,
That would
yeah.
like to do that. Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely
I'm going
one
to
of our
bet.
special interests for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, oh my gosh. So you're going to have to send me all of those.
Yeah,
Literally. You're going to have to list them for me and I will put them in the description for this episode and then when it goes on YouTube. So before we go, can you let everybody know? So I mentioned that Holly is an illustrator, graphic designer, with quite a few other credits to her name. But her work is beautiful,
Hmm.
and I would like to know where everyone can go see it, buy it, hire you, all the good things.
Sure. My website is hollymaher.com. It's spelled weirdly, but I'm sure it's on the screen somewhere.
Yeah.
My handle on TikTok is Holly Hockett. I'm on there every once in a while. I'm on Instagram too. And the agency where my boyfriend and I do community, like arts community support here in Nashville and create magazines and do programming, it's called the New Athenian. Um, and my stationery company is called Wink Wink Paper Co. Uh,
Yes, it's adorable.
thank you.
Adorable, adorable. Yes. So thank you so much for being here. I super appreciate it. It's very enlightening for me. I hope it's enlightening for others. And I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sticking on the insane train of conversation that is ADHD.